All right. And we are live. Ladies, gentlemen, brethren, all, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our opinions and thoughts are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodges or respective craft or concordant bodies, etc., and inclusive. I am one of your co-hosts, Stephen Chung. I'm a decorated senior DMLA from Vancouver, BC, a past master of Prince Charles Lodge, number 153 here in beautiful Kelowna, British Columbia. I'm also 32nd degree Scottish Rite and a past Vice Peace and Grand Master in the Valley of Vernon. Today with me is very worshipful brother David Colbeth. I'll pass the torch off to him and he can continue.
Hey, good afternoon, Stephen. Thanks, and welcome to the show, everyone. I'm David Colbeth. I'm from just south of Seattle, Bonnie Lake, Washington. I'm a past master of King Solomon Lodge in Auburn, Washington. Pastor Deputy for District 13. Hey, District 13. And Scottish Rite Mason and a few other things. I'm not actually DMLA, but I'm a chairman of our chapter and enjoy being part of that. We just had our installation for the DMLA last Saturday. It was a great event, Stephen, so we thought about that sometime. With us today, I'm sorry to say we're not having Connor today. He's not feeling well, I think, and so hopefully our prayers and thoughts go out to him today. But with us today is my good friend and compatriot, very worshipful brother, Zane McCune. He and I were masters together and deputies and whatnot. So give a little introduction here. Just want to say hi quick bit, Zane, and I'll read your bio here.
Yeah, hi, happy to be here. Thanks for having me on the show today.
Awesome. So very worshipful Zane was born into a musical family in Seattle in 1970 and grew up on Rain Song Ranch in Woodinville, Washington. He attended University of Puget Sound on a music scholarship, but graduated with a finance degree and began a career in banking in 1992. He's married, has 3 children, and spends his time trying to keep up with the social calendar as a youngest daughter who is 12. That is an accomplishment.
Well, I'm not saying I'm doing it successfully.
Very Worshipful Zane became Master Mason in 2007 at Verity Lodge, number 59 in Kent, Washington, and he has served as Worshipful Master twice and since as Secretary of his lodge. He's served the Grand Lodge of Washington, a number of committees, as Trustee of Washington Masonic Charities, Grand Musician, Grand Order, and Grand Lecturer. And from 2016 to 2018, he served as the Deputy of the Grand Master in District 13. He has spoken regionally at several events, including Northwest Esotericism in Freemasonry Conference, and he currently serves as an instructor for the Lodge Leadership Committee, where he teaches several classes and ritual work leading lodges and membership development. Again, welcome to the show, Zane. We're glad to have you.
Thank you. Appreciate being on the show.
Absolutely. Well, today we're kind of talking a little bit about the developing lodge culture and lodge experience. I know you have some direct experience in that.
Yeah.
We'll talk a little bit about what's going on with Verity, and we can dive into that, and then maybe we can come back, circle around into how you became a Mason and how all that started.
It'll be a winding road with a rough and rugged road that we'll be taking today.
Familiar, right?
Right. Yeah. So I'm a member of Verity Lodge 59, which I'm proud to be a member of. But like many other lodges, there are times when lodges are ebbing and flowing and feeling like they're doing strong, and then all of a sudden people leave or move or something happens, and you feel like you kind of go into a rebuilding phase. And so that happened to us 6 or 7 years ago, and it actually was probably a blessing in disguise. At a moment then, it was like, oh my gosh, is this lodge going to survive? But once we all kind of hunkered down, we said, gosh, we have this opportunity to kind of build this lodge back up in a way that we would like to kind of do this lodge, sort of the operation of the lodge. And so that's what we did over the course of 5 years, challenging like every element within the lodge. Like, why do we do this? Why do we do this? I'm not talking code and ritual work. I'm just talking about the culture of the lodge, and why do we have this function, and why do we do things this way? And so it was that constant feedback loop to ourselves that sort of drove us to examine and and rebuild and refine. And 5 years later, I feel really proud to be a member of that lodge. So I've been there firsthand, and I've had a lot of Grand Lodge experience. But probably one of the favorite things I like to do is to be on this lodge leadership committee, because it gives me a chance to meet with so many of the developing leaders within the lodges of the jurisdiction. And so I meet lots and lots of guys that are kind of where we were 5-6 years ago. Like, we're excited to be Masons. We joined this lodge. We're not quite sure the direction it's going. What advice would you give us? And so it's a great place to start a dialogue. But that's what I like to do.
And I know that without going into a lot of details, that Verity Lodge, like many lodges, have gone through those ebbs and tides a few times. And so while you were coming through that valley, so to speak, it had been through a valley not too long before that. And, like any lodges, probably many of them, many valleys over time.
Yeah, we had. When we celebrated our 125th anniversary several years ago, I would describe our lodge as a 125-year-old brand new lodge.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But there is something kind of refreshing about taking something down to the studs, like a house remodel, taking things down to the studs and kind of, well, we're in the middle of that, so everything's about house remodel. Bringing it down to the studs and kind of rebuilding it back up. If you could join the lodge exactly the way you kind of want it to be, well, great. Let's just do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Neat opportunity to be able to have that done too.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And some lodges actually could just benefit from being revitalized in that sense. You see a lot of it where they're just putzing along, doing their thing, and eventually they're going to run into a real membership issue.
Yeah. We owe our kind of spark to a few people who came in and kind of just spoke to us in a very frank way and got us all excited about pointing in one direction. And so we feel it was sort of our obligation to kind of be there for other lodges that are going down a similar path. So kind of like a mystic tie, but at a lodge level, not a person-to-person level. And there's been lots of lodges in the Puget Sound that have connected with our lodge, asking the similar questions that what we faced several years ago.
Are there any particular, I hate to use the word guru, but folks that are in Masonry or publications or books? I know Masonic Experience and some other publications have helped to develop those foundations. Is there anything you can attribute, or a few they could attribute to your?
Yeah, that's a good question. So several years ago, I read a book called Observing the Craft by Brother Andrew Hammer, and he's currently the president of the Masonic Restoration Foundation. And that book it's not a historical book. It's not an esoteric book. I think of that book as kind of a call to arms. And it really kind of asks the question, do you deserve the charter that is in your lodge? And, that's a tough question to ask. And a lot of us at the lodge were like, well, maybe we need to re-examine kind of what we're doing. And so I would have really, there were a few along the way as well, but Andrew was probably probably one of the most important ones. I've had a chance to meet him several times and have some really good one-on-one dialogue with him. And our lodge, Verity Lodge, became the 49th lodge, I think, in the country to be acknowledged by the Masonic Restoration Foundation for the work that we're doing. So that's we're proud of that too.
Awesome. Yeah, I know he came, was it last year or 2 years ago, to the leadership conference? And
yeah, a couple years ago.
Yeah. I was not able to be there for that, and I understand it was a pretty amazing performance and show that he talked about. And so what classes do you teach at the leadership conference?
Oh gosh, let's see. It's a busy day when I'm there. I teach a ritual, excellence in ritual, and I teach kind of how to run a meeting. That's kind of a block and tackle class. And probably the one that's most well attended is membership development. And then for the first time, I think in a very long time, we conducted a panel discussion at the Lodge Leadership Retreat. So I hosted 3 other Masons who were from different lodges around the state, all experiencing some successes and all still tackling some challenges. And really it was just kind of a panel discussion. It was amazing. At 8 a.m., about a quarter of the entire conference had descended on this room to hear these 3 Masons talk about what they're doing in their lodge. And it showed us that not only can Masons learn from Grand Lodge experience, but really peer-to-peer experience is just as important when it comes to working on your lodge.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's so. Stephen, do you have any kind of a leadership program in BC that you like? I guess we should talk about what the leadership retreat is. It used to be called the Wardens Conference. And that spurred out of one of the districts that had a leadership training program they had in place for their deacons and stewards, and also for their officers, and that became the Wardens Conference. And so a statewide event to help the officers of the lodge, stewards, deacons, wardens, as they're moving up to the chairs. And then it has morphed into this leadership retreat. They call it leadership conference now. Last 5 years, 6 years, I think they changed the name. And so it's really designed for anyone that wants to be a leader. And I don't know, Stephen, if you have something like that in BC that you guys work on.
They do. It's above my level. I don't get to play on those Grand Lodge committees. I have other ones I play on, the technology committee to deal with the website and how we integrate things technology-wise into our districts. In specific, I work with the calendar program, and but yeah, there are guys that are on committees like that's one of the things that is we're finding it's evolving in our district when they come and we do a thing now. They're doing a webcast thing so that we don't all have to travel into Vancouver. That's a 4-hour drive for us from Kelowna. And so now they're broadcasting some things, but there's concerns about how secure those channels are and so on.
Yeah.
So there's some hesitation about totally adopting that type of technology to reach the masses all at the same time. In our area, we have a district education officer that tries to do those types of functions, whether it's a lodge officer's guide workshop or just strictly an education type day. He does a few of those types of things throughout the year, but Grand Lodge currently is trying to figure a way to hit the masses and keep it secure. So.
Yeah, I think, this Lodge Leadership Retreat, it's, like I said, a lot of peer-to-peer discussion and personal interaction. But I know that over the years, they've tried to record some of the classes and then make those available on a secure website. So I don't think they did that this year, but that's one of the ways they incorporated technology into that.
Zane, if you had to kind of pick one of the classes, which is there a particular class that you think you really enjoy the most there?
Well, definitely membership development. I mean, to me, that's I think that's why a lot of lodges send somebody. I mean, there's block and tackle, learning how to run a meeting, and these are important. This is not just suggestions like have an agenda and know your ritual work really well. I mean, if it was just that, we'd finish that in 30 seconds. We talk about communication and on all sorts of things. But that being said, membership development, I think, is probably what is on the front of mind for most Masons is, my lodge is not doing well. And what do we do? Like, they struggle with that question. And everybody struggles with that question from time to time, but more so in some other lodges that just haven't figured out how to kind of hit their stride on development.
Can you expand on what you mean by membership development? Because I'm sure to a lot of people, they could assume that means something quite different.
Sure. Actually, that's a really good point. And so I think from a lot of lodges, the number of Masons in your lodge is is held up as being a sign of success. Oh, you initiated 5 new Masons into your lodge this year. Congratulations, great job. Your lodge has, 80 members on the roll. You're great, good job. But if not all of those Masons are engaged, you're really kind of missing the point. So it became a numbers game, and I think that's the narrative that a lot of Grand Lodges tell to their Blue Lodges. Membership development means to me more of creating a quality Masonic experience that Masons want to come back to time and time again within their lodge, and that's what drives their level of engagement. In fact, we spend a little bit of time talking about the focus on the numbers is what's keeping you from getting traction. Focusing on running a really great lodge with a really great experience, great ritual work, Masonic education, kind of constantly developing each of the members, setting goals and examining, are you hitting those goals? And bringing in different elements within the lodge so that they're happy and proud to be a member of that lodge. That's what's going to drive the engaged Mason to go to lodge every month.
I like this guy. He thinks very much along the same lines as our lodge. We're currently doing a bunch of those different things. We started, a long time ago with the 6-step program, and then we expanded the mentorship program over the last few years. And it's funny because some of the guys, the original guys that came through that mentorship program, are now mentors themselves and getting to give back the things that were done for them. And they're really enjoying that fact. And, of course, we've been listening to our membership and identifying that we wanted more education that was along the lines of the type of education that they wanted, rather than what was being built and delivered, assuming that's what they were looking for. So we've done things like a more light night where it's a casual conversation. Topics are started at the beginning, and who knows where they go. The path goes along, and as the conversation stops and starts, they're getting what they're looking for now, and they're spreading the word. So that's really cool. And it's we've been trying really hard to do much along the lines of what you were talking about.
So unfortunately, a lot of lodges will assume that education means reading something out of the Washington Masonic Code, and they kind of check that box. And it's an important box to check. Don't get me wrong. Most jurisdictions have some kind of installation for the worshipful master that charge them with reading the code in their lodge. But I don't really view that as education per se. I think education is much more diving into the symbolic nature of the craft, elements within the craft, and things of this sort. So you can't just check the box and say, well, we read section 12 of the code, and so there's our education for the night. That's not why guys show up to
the why behind what we do, right?
Yeah. One of the things that our lodge started doing several years ago, most lodges down here in Washington, they have dinner around the 6:30 hour, and then they start their lodge meeting at 7:30. And then whether or not they have anything after lodge is, kind of hit or miss. We switch things around a little bit on our degree nights. And on degree night, we start our degree right out of the gates at 6:30. There is no social hour before that degree starts. As a matter of fact, we're all in the lodge room when the candidate shows up. He shows up to greet the Tyler at the door and is conducted into the preparation room where he gets ready. And so we have the degree first, and it's a real solemn event. And then after the degree, we all adjourn to the dining room in kind of a roundtable format that we call Agape, and it's Masonic education about that degree. It's not super structured, but it's on topic of that degree. And we hear from a lot of the Masons in the room. We hear from the candidate at the evening. So again, that's kind of how we incorporate Masonic education on a degree night.
Nice. I like that.
The other thing we do for, at least in our lodge, education-wise, is on a stated meeting. Education is a must at every meeting. Our lodge budgets at least two speakers to come in from out of state. We're usually picking Masons that we see on kind of national level or regional. We just had brothers from the Philadelphia Society down in Oregon come up and present recently. So we bring in Masonic speakers that are outside of our jurisdiction, and then at the other stated meetings, each officer will take a meeting and develop and work on some kind of, education program. Later this month, we've got our junior steward is doing a presentation on Freemasonry in the military. We meet just the Friday before Memorial Day, so it seemed like an appropriate topic, but anyway.
Can you talk a little bit about that? How while you don't have a stated meeting each month, you're not dark, essentially. You have something going on every month. And so there's some lodges that they struggle. It seems like they have 2 meetings every month. And I think, man, just having one's a lot, but you guys have done a really great job of interweaving dedicated education and dedicated programs in with your stated meeting schedule.
Yeah. It's just about finding the right balance, Dave, and it's not one recipe for one lodge might not necessarily work for another. So, I'm very much hey, if it's working in your lodge, keep doing it. But if your lodge is struggling to have, a quality event or Masons come to your meeting or any of the above, it doesn't hurt to just rethink what you do. You don't have to keep doing the same thing over and over. For us, it was about, probably 5 or 6 years ago, we said, we're one of those lodges that met all year long, except for the 2 summer months where it went dark. And then, September, we kind of tried to gear back up again, but we had been gone for 2 months. We didn't like that. We wanted a little more consistency. And we also said, what does our budget look like? Can we even budget for 10 really solid, great meetings? And we kind of said, gee, 6 seems to be the sweet spot for us. And so we set out to come up with this rhythm of a stated meeting every other month. And then those are the odd months. And then on the even months is when we did our degree work or Feast of St. John or Table Lodge or some other kind of function. So for us, we are at lodge on the 4th Friday of every month, but we're only doing formal business every other month.
Yeah, I've talked with some people about the idea of rhythm and all that. And there's this, I think a lot of guys that have come through the heyday, if you will, of the late 40s and early 50s, when there was 50,000 Masons in Washington, they still are thinking that, gosh, you need to get these guys in, get them voted on, and get them become Masons as fast as they can.
Yeah.
And letting them experience the process. And I still remember 12 years ago when I was coming through, I didn't know what I was going through. And so if it had taken 6 months or a year for me to go through, that would have been fine. I wouldn't have known any different. And so we think these guys are in a hurry to get in. And so like Steve was talking about with the 6 Steps program, allowing them to experience the initiatic process and become ready to be a Mason.
Yeah.
Has been important. And some guys, I say 6 steps could be 6 weeks or 6 days, 6 weeks, 6 months. It depends on the guy, really. And then he's ready to take the first degree.
Yeah. We definitely set that expectation up front. And for us, we don't extend a petition. Well, our job during the 6 steps is to make sure that if a man really wants to be a Mason, we find him the right lodge. That lodge may or may not be our lodge. We know we do things a little bit differently. We took there were a lot of Masons that kind of giggled when we said, yeah, we're not going to meet every month as a stated. We're going to switch to this every other month. And a lot of people said, oh, your lodge is going to die. You're never going to survive. And when I heard that, I'm like, we're probably on the right path. It just feels like we're, like growing pains, culture pains. I kind of talk about it as turning the culture corner of a lodge and doing things differently. In the 6 steps, I'd say probably half of the guys that reach our lodge, or maybe 30% of the guys that reach our lodge, actually petition. And that's after waiting probably close to 6 months to get in. And then they go through the degrees, and it kind of takes about a year to go through that. And I know that that's not common with most lodges, but that's the way we do it. We like the idea of handcrafting our masons, one master mason at a time, or at least just a handful of master masons at a time.
So you mentioned doing all your business every other month. So do you eliminate then by making that a big business focused meeting? Do you no longer need board of general purpose meetings, or do you still have those types?
So that sounds like something you guys probably do in your jurisdiction separately. We can do. Is that an officers meeting, or is that a?
It's an open meeting for all the membership of the lodge, where we actually do all the discussion around events and work that has to be done and so on.
Okay.
And we take care of the actual business, the meat of it.
So I think in Ohio, I was talking to one of the guys I think it's Ohio, that they do something similar before their stated meeting and dinner time. They break out in their committees and they talk about their work, what needs to happen. And if you want to bring something up on the floor in lodge, and you got to go and meet with that committee and talk with them and get the committee to decide, and then the committee will bring it up on the floor in lodge, and then they vote, and that's it. So there really isn't any discussion. It's all kind of pre-hammered out beforehand.
Yeah. We have an officers meeting every month still. And we call that an officers meeting. It is open to anybody that wants to come. But we don't open lodge, and we don't vote on anything that should come before the lodge. It is dialogue, but it is a lot of that prep work behind the scenes. And so when we're at lodge, most of the things are all developed well ahead of time, or we open them up for discussion, but they don't take quite as long because we've all kind of hashed out a lot of that ahead of time. But what that does, really, Stephen, is only meeting every other month frees us up from kind of having to do that business. Because again, guys don't really come down to lodge because they want to sit in another business meeting. They've really been in a business. They've been in plenty of business meetings all day long already. So it really frees us up for not having to do that every month. And those months where we don't meet on a stated meeting, we still open lodge. We still conduct Masonic labor. We still, initiate candidates, but the focus is all on that event for that night, not what are we voting on. Right.
That's pretty cool. What's the impact since you guys made all these types of changes in your lodge? What's been the impact membership? What's been the growth and retention rate?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. If you subscribe to the idea that there's actually different kinds of lodges out there, that you can have kind of there's lodges that tend to be a little more social. There's lodges that tend to be a little bit more esoteric. There are a lot, and you could probably come up with at least arguably 4 to 5 kind of different lodge types. Those members that were looking for really kind of that purely social lodge, they actually left our lodge. And they joined lodges within our district, and that's perfectly fine. And we're still brothers with them, and we still see them all the time, and we still love them. Our lodge went in the direction of a little more of a esoteric in nature, and that became the focus of the lodge. So those members that's what they were looking for are absolutely engaged, and we still love to have fun. We just had a Scotch tasting event earlier this month. We had 12 brothers there and 4 men who were interested in Freemasonry, and this was not their first function. So this was them just continuing to get to know us as we go through the 6 steps. But for those brothers who are really kind of looking for, while they're at lodge, a more esoteric and initiatic experience, they're fully engaged in our lodge. But there was definitely a growing pain, 5 years ago when we kind of made that shift. It was tough.
Yeah, I'll bet it was. I can imagine the resistance you must have had.
Oh, yeah.
The one thing about change, in lodge, right?
But what's really, any kind of change in lodge. What's key though is, and I talk about this with brothers at Lodge Leadership Retreat. We have this narrative that seems to keep kind of running in the background, and I'll say, this, my observation is that we have this narrative running in the background that lodges are losing members because they are going on to that celestial lodge. We're losing them because they're passing away, and that's why membership is really kind of falling at most lodges. And I think that's the narrative that we've been telling ourselves for a long time. Might have been true 15 years ago, but last year, it wasn't losing members to the celestial lodge that caused most lodges to lose people from coming. It was a growth in NPD in demits that really is what you see as happening for most lodges. And to me, what that means is retention. It's a retention issue, not a passing away issue. So lodges that aren't able to retain their members once they're initiating them should be kind of examining, in my opinion, why are they meeting? What are they doing there? Are you not explaining to these men up front what your lodge is about? Or do they come into Freemasonry thinking it's one thing only to find out that it's actually something else? And it's that gap that causes membership retention problems.
Well, and if every lodge ran a sort of 6-step program or anything like it, they would be doing a much better job at identifying what the prospects are looking for and whether or not it's a fit for their lodge.
Yeah.
I got a lot of grief over, or not really a lot of grief, but I had a lot of rolled eyeballs when I directed one prospect to the other lodge in our hall. He kept in my interviewing with him. I knew him as a young D. Malay boy that went through the chapter here in Kelowna when I was chapter dad years ago, and he was finally ready to petition lodge. And in our meeting, he kept going about how his father and grandfather and uncles were part of St. George's Lodge, and so that might have some more, emotional ties for him at that lodge, right? So I pointed him in the direction of their recruiter and gave him the number. Here, give him a call, sit down with him, and sure enough, he ended up joining that lodge. On that premise that there's the family history is in that lodge, and that meant something to him. And so, but for me, it was more important that he find the right lodge to join.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've met with lots of guys over a cup of coffee, and they don't join our lodge, but they become Masons, and I'm happy about that. One of the things that we do probably a little differently with the 6-step program is they, once they get through steps 1 through 5, when they're petitioning our lodge, we give them something called, it's an opening charge in other jurisdictions called the Ways of Virtue. And it's not esoteric work. It's all clear text. But we have them read this and then write a short response about what that Ways of Virtue means to them, and that is read in lodge along with their petition. And I think it's just another one of those setting the expectation of that brother that you're going to be thinking about Masonry for a long time, if you join our lodge, this is one of these ways that you're gonna be doing that, either writing a paper, writing a presentation, getting up and speaking in lodge. It's not just show up and pay the bills and have some chili for dinner and head home. It's more than that.
I'd love to get a copy of that, because I think that's kind of a neat thing. I'd love to examine possibility of using something like that in our process.
Sure.
I think getting them to write their thoughts and sharing those thoughts, much like, we do that in Scottish Rite when they come into the 4th degree in Scottish Rite. There's papers written and thoughts given and so on. So I like that idea. That's pretty clever.
It's an opening charge. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just noting the time, and I know you had a place to be, so I didn't want to take you past that. It's 12:37 our time now, so we should probably start our wrap up. Is there any message that you wanted to get out today that you're not sure you got out, or you wanted to promote anything in particular? On our podcast, because remember, this podcast will be seen and viewed for over the years and generations,
in perpetuity. I think there's like I said at the beginning, there's many lodges are experiencing a bit of a renaissance, I think, or there's the very humble beginnings of one, maybe the few embers that are glowing in their lodge. And if there are Masons out there that have joined a lodge and are excited about being a Mason, but maybe their lodge just needs to maybe take a step back and just examine the elements within the lodge, things that drive their lodge. I like to think of it as like an operating system, and the content is Freemasonry, but the operating system in and of itself can get updated all the time. It's just, how do you conduct and how do you operate a lodge? We're not talking about changing code or ritual or anything else. It's just, what kind of experience do you want to create for your members to encourage them to come back, week after week or month after month, or whatever kind of cycle your lodge is on. And it's okay to re-examine those things. There's probably lots of sacred cows in the lodge that nobody would think of to touch. We've always done this function, and we've done it every year for the past 20 years. It's absolutely okay to re-examine those. And maybe you find out during that process you don't change them and everybody embraces them. But if it's one of those things that you think everybody wants to do and only 3 or 4 people are even putting their time and energy into, maybe it's time to kind of re-examine what you do down at lodge, because it may be something that's holding you back. So it's okay to look at those things, as long as everything has some intent and purpose. And as Dave pointed out earlier, kind of the why are we doing this down at lodge? It's okay.
And so, is it your mission at the moment that you will communicate with lodges that are looking for help in figuring this stuff out? And do you want to put your information out there for those that want to get a hold of you to see if you can help their lodge in rethinking things?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, kind of as a response to the year after I was Grand Order, I launched a Facebook page called the Masonic Experience, and it is for Masons only. I do ask, what lodge you're from, and that the topics stay on topic of Masonry. But for brothers that are really interested in learning from other Masons, kind of that peer-to-peer, so to speak, they can join the Masonic Experience and not just get the benefit of interacting with either me or our lodge, but a whole host of other Masons who kind of join that page that all have the same intent, which is to continually make their lodge better. So they're more than welcome to join that page.
Excellent. David, anything that you wanted to wrap up with?
No, I do enjoy that Facebook page, by the way, and we're well promoted on the Facebook, on the Masonic Experience Facebook page. We appreciate that, and there's some great discussions out there, and some definitely some sacred cows being had for dinner.
Right. It's tough. You're going to get a lot of the old guard that's going to say, we've always done it that way. You can't change it. Well, you can, and it's going to be okay. And if I was to say anything to the new guys coming in, is it's okay to examine the why. I'd also challenge the the past masters. You've got a whole generation of ritualists to groom. You've got a whole new generation of masons that are going to be taking over the leadership of the lodge. And if you want your lodge to not just survive but thrive, you need to give them the the okay from you to move into a different direction. Don't hold them back by just sticking to the way that things have always been done at lodge. Just let go just a little bit, and you might find that these new masons will surprise you.
Yeah.
If you send us an email at info@theworkingtoolspodcast.com, we will add any of the links to the story, or pardon me, Connor, when he gets back here, we'll add these things into the information on the YouTube video, and it'll stay there attached for those looking later into our notes, right? And we really appreciate you taking the time to come on. Now knowing that you are probably well versed in the esoteric side of masonry, I think maybe we might invite you back for one of these conversations that we're going to try and have soon with on esotericism. One of the early guys on our podcast is looking forward to that, and I think that you'd be a great guy to have back. So thank you again.
Sure.
Hope you'll come back with us.
Yeah, it'd be my pleasure to.
And again, send us those notes, and we will put them into the notes here. And to all of those in podcast land, please rate these videos if you like them and enjoy them as much as we enjoy doing them. Tell YouTube that, tell Facebook that, because it really helps in our rankings. And that's about it. So I'm going to sign off. And
who do we have coming on next week?
Oh, yeah, right. Next week, we have a past Grandmaster of British Columbia, the one and only Doug Collins from Kamloops. He's going to talk on the future of Freemasonry and the things that he thinks that we can do to help propel ourselves into the modern ages.
Yeah, and I know Connor, if he was here, he would say if there's any particular topics that you want or people, guests you'd like to see, please let us know in the comments, or as Stephen mentioned, info@theworkingtools.com is our
Working Tools Podcast.
Working Tools Podcast, excuse me, Working Tools Podcast. I'm still kind of the new guy here. I think that one of the other shows, they actually call him the intern or the new guy. I don't want to. Maybe I could have that.
Yeah.
The new guy. All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate the opportunity to be on the show.
All right. Enjoy yourselves. Enjoy the rest of the day, brethren. And we are off air.